Interviews with haunting gurus.
What's up, my fiends? It's Baker, and I'm hanging from the rafters with the YouTube sensation that's been sweeping the nation. From Van Oaks Props, it's Derek Young. What's up, Derek?
Hey, Chris. Long time no see.
I know it's been a while. First out of the gate, we'll get some business taken care of.
Yes.
First thing I wanted to do is thank you for. I mean, this is, Jesus, talk about years ago, a decade ago. I wanted to thank you for some of the help that you did when we were doing that whole Hauntcast Resurrection Jerry Lewis telethon back in the day.
The good old days, as I like to call them.
You know, the pre-crowdfunding. It was the precursor to crowdfunding. I don't even think anybody was crowdfunding at that time. So it was a very odd thing for people. I'm not giving my. And then next thing you know, a couple of years later, it's like Patreon, subscribe, all the crowdfunding, Kickstarters were all over the friggin' place. I'm like, I don't know. I guess if it was a couple of years later, it really would have went off much better because it would have been such a normal thing for everybody to be doing at the time. But because I know every creator, Patreon helps. You know, I'm sure with you, all of the little extras are part of the bigger whole. Yeah,
for sure. It's the octopus approach.
Yeah, the tentacles.
You really kind of have to have irons in as many fires as you possibly can in order to stay afloat in this creator economy.
Yeah. Now you are located. This is something you're not in Van Oaks. You're in Sherman Oaks. Is that right?
That's correct.
The
short version of this story is that back in the 1950s, well, up until about maybe 20 years ago, the neighborhood that I live in was called Van Nuys. And when I moved into this house, the neighbor across the street came over and said, "Welcome to Van Oaks," because it had recently been rezoned to be Sherman Oaks because people wanted to drive their property values up. And so for some reason or another, it just stuck. And so that's what I ended up calling the Haunt. And then when the Haunt became the YouTube channel, it sort of all became part of the same package.
Now, I actually do know the name Sherman Oaks. Do you know who Bud Eakins is? Any clue?
I do not.
Probably not. Bud Eakins was a stuntman, a motorcyclist. He had a motorcycle shop in Sherman Oaks. I have a Triumph T-shirt that says, Triumph, Bud Eakins, Sherman Oaks, California. And he was a really good friend of Steve McQueen. And if you've ever seen the Great Escape movie, he is the stuntman who does the jump over the barbed wire fence at the end of the movie when Steve McQueen is trying to, because they wouldn't let Steve McQueen do it. Because Steve McQueen was of insurance and liabilities, so his buddy looked enough like him, and he was an amazing motorcyclist because they used to race together all the time. So anyway, this isn't Triumph or Motorcycle Cast. This is a Hauntcast. It was just something that I have the T-shirt that says Sherman Oaks on it, and when I looked up where your location was, and I'm like, wait a minute, it's not Van Oaks, it's Sherman Oaks. What the hell is going on? And then I was like, oh shit, that's how you have the Sherman Oaks T-shirt. Anyway, so how did your Halloween obsession begin? I always love to find out how, most people it's pretty common, but sometimes it's not.
From the time I was a child, 5, 6 years old, my parents got me into doing musical theater and stuff like that when I was really young, 5, 6 years old. And, a lot of that kind of becomes fun dress up and getting to be someone else, which when those things aren't going on, you kind of look for other creative avenues. And Halloween kind of was one of those things where I could just be, creative in a different way. And growing up, my dad worked for the motion picture industry. And so if there was a great idea I had for a Halloween costume or something, I would just say, this is what I want. And he would come home with this thing that he kind of cobbled together from, stuff that they use in the movies, and would create these crazy costumes for me. And so that kind of went from, one day out of the month, out of the year, to decorating around the house. And then when I got into high school, I became friends with a guy who was really into special effects. And he was ending up getting hired to go set up Halloween displays for celebrities. And one of the times he was down a man and asked if I would come and help out. And that just like really kind of added fuel to the fire for me. And so I think the following year, I just went whole hog on decorating my parents' house for Halloween, even though we lived on a cul-de-sac and we never got kids coming to trick or treat. But it was just something that I did because I thought it was interesting. And when I finally got a home of my own, it was really that opportunity to just like really kick it into high gear and do all of the things that, I'd had decades to think about. And then finally, with places like Haunt Forum and Halloween Forum.
Oh, those were the days. So, those were the days.
It really was. It really was.
Dude, I really miss the days before Facebook was a thing, when everybody was just on the forums, and it was just, I don't know, it was just like a simpler, a cooler experience than it, because now everything's so fragmented. Everybody starts their own group and everybody polices their own group. And it's just like, I like when everybody had to be in those like one or two forums. Those, I don't know. That was just, I look back on it with fond memories.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing too was like when people went to those places, they went with intention. They wanted to talk about a very specific subject. And I feel like, I don't know, maybe people were more focused because there were less to split their time against.
Yeah, they couldn't just click. So they couldn't immediately just click over and be in like, I don't know, in like the Star Wars group or some other thing going on. Yeah, they nothing else was pulling them away. They were there for that purpose, and they were a lot more engaged in like comments and posting things, and yeah,
and it was basically a community of sharing. People weren't so worried about being the first to do anything, and it was encouraging to like see people take the tidbits of information that you'd throw up there and then turn it into something else. So there was like a lot of innovation happening during that time, and the haunters were really kind of using this like hive mind approach to figure out ways to make our Halloween displays just that much better. And now it doesn't feel quite the same because there's so much stuff available to just purchase. And so you get, I think, sort of less artistry and more familiar looking decorations. Like everybody's got the 12-foot skeleton kind of thing.
The people are posting about their Home Depot stuff and everything else. And I'm like, I just want to build stuff. Like I'm not really interested in looking at store-bought things. I just don't, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't interest me. I just, like, I want to see people, like what people are building. And I find myself, I'm going back over to the forums now. I've been posting there. Like last season, I posted a bunch of tutorials over there. I looked around, commented on some stuff. It's a fraction of what it used to be, of course, but I still find myself like longing to want to like drop in, even if it's kind of dead over there. Haunt Forum is almost like a ghost town, but Halloween Forum still has something going on. But I'm wondering, when is the next big thing? Like MySpace had its time. Facebook seems to have had its time. I'm like, I go over there, I got a group there, but I'd rather have something, a group or some other, like maybe a Discord. I don't even know what to do. I'm like, I got a group. I'll just pop in occasionally, but whatever. Anyway, once again, off the rails. Don't let me get off the rails, Derek. Keep me focused. Keep me on. Keep me on point. Anyway, but yeah. How about we talk about how about we just get like right into Van Oak Cemetery, talk about your haunt for a little bit.
Sure.
What was the genesis of Van Oak Cemetery?
As someone who just has a true affinity for Halloween, and when it's paired with a unhealthy fascination with the Haunted Mansion, something was bound to happen, you know? Uh, and it literally was like, here are the keys to your house. And I was like, great, let me get to making some tombstones. And that first year of Halloween was rough. Being a new homeowner and not really having a budget for doing Halloween decorations can really cramp your style. But it started very modestly and kind of continues in that tradition today. It's funny, because people can post about places and things that they see online, you get feedback now, which before it was, either you happen to be outside fixing something and a neighbor would say, hey, the decorations look great this year or whatever. But now you hop online and somebody's telling you, oh, I drove over to this place and I checked it out and it really wasn't all that great. So, don't waste your time if you're looking for decorated houses to go look at for Halloween, something like that. But I kind of take pride in the fact that what we do isn't flashy. It's like almost, I spend most of my time focusing on how to make things look so realistic that people forget that they're looking at a house and not looking at a cemetery.
Yeah.
And I think, that's just kind of like where it's at for me. It's half of my love of other haunts and the haunters who've come before me that did stuff that impressed me when I was growing up. And my love for the art of like scenic painting and prop making that just makes our version of Halloween not as exciting as I think a lot of other people. But I think when you come and look at our display, you understand, like, we truly love Halloween, and the stuff that we do is to like create an experience or to set the mood that makes October feel more like Halloween.
Yeah.
Rather than just being like, there's a skeleton or there's a jump scare, or there's a bloodied whatever from, the Halloween store or whatnot. It's just like it's a different requirement than I think a lot of people like for when they, decorate for Halloween. And it's just,
I hear you. I get where you're coming from, and my haunt, I try to go for more of a creepy thing. I don't, there's no clowns, there's no chainsaws, there's no, I like to build creatures, and I want things to be like kind of creepy and swampish and whatever. I remember hearing a debate back, this was a number of years ago, and I think this was on some Facebook group. And somebody was arguing that if you don't do a walkthrough haunt, you're not a home haunter. Like, you don't have a home haunt, or, if you do if you only have a display. And I was like, that's insane. Like, what are you talking about? Like, if you're doing something, we're not talking about an inflatable out front. We're talking about putting out, hand like props and, whether the store-bought or whatever, homemade, but you're putting together a haunt. It doesn't have to be a walkthrough. Not everybody can do walkthroughs. Most people, when you do a walkthrough, it friggin' ruins. Like, I had so many headaches from doing a walkthrough where I almost got closed down by the town, and then I had fights with almost fist fights with my neighbors over it. I finally was just like, I'm just not doing a walkthrough anymore. It's just like, I just want to enjoy Halloween now, and I did all the running around trying to do a walkthrough for a couple of years. I'm done with that, I love the fact that people do walkthroughs, and I want to go through walkthroughs. But if I had more people, like you are in a mecca of Halloween haunts all over the place, home haunts.
Yes.
I don't have that opportunity. Like, I would have to drive hours to go find a home haunt. Ones that know of anyway. I'm sure that people do things and do cool displays, but you know, they're not posting them all over online. They're not a attention whore like myself, but you know what I mean? It's just so I love to find people who I've never been aware of and who do their own thing on like in their local area. They're not posting it. They're not putting up web pages and Facebook pages and doing all that stuff. They just do their own thing. But you have a great opportunity to be surrounded by all of these people and all of these haunts out there, which is pretty badass. Now, is everything in your front yard? Is everything does it wrap around the side, or is it just out front?
It's just out front. It's probably, I think I measured, it's maybe 50 feet wide and 20 feet deep. And it's separated by a brick pathway. Mm-hmm. So it's not big. You know, I get it when people say, you know, it's not worth the drive. It's not a big display where, you know, if you were coming from an hour away just to see our haunt, you know, please save the gas. It's heavily documented online. Don't worry about it. So, you know, it's not very big. But I think that's allowed us kind of a little bit of freedom because we know exactly the parameters that we're working under. And I know that if I want to add something new to it, something old has to go, which is both good and bad because at a certain point I will hit stasis and I won't be able to decide what needs to go in order for something new to come in.
Yeah.
But we haven't gotten there yet. But I feel like we're probably inching closer to it every year.
A lot of what I'm kind of involved with or the last couple of years, as I look at something and go, you know what, I was never really super happy with that, and I really want to remake that thing, and it just didn't come out the way I wanted it. I mean, everybody else was probably like, oh, that's great, that looks fine, you know, but I look at it and go, nah, I'm gonna rework that. So I've been reworking a lot of stuff that I've had out there, and I'm just like, yeah, it's got to go. Like I'm just gonna redo it, remake it, or just give it a makeover, and you know that freshens things up enough a lot of times. But I mean, I'm kind of motivated this year, so I got some big plans ahead. But when was that Hollywood Haunter video shot? That interview where he came by your house? How long ago was that? Was that like 5 years ago?
Oh, probably. Yeah.
So it looks like you have like every like home haunt staple. You have like the rocking tombstone, the moving shovel, the mud monster statue. Yeah. Got the projection. Yep. Projection ghost in the window. You have a floating lantern, right?
It depends. It's
if it's working that night.
When it's working, yes, we have it. Come on by and take a picture. When it is not, I don't want to talk about it because we can get into the weeds on this one because I feel like if you're listening to this podcast, you would appreciate this. So the idea that I had for the floating lantern was to not just do sort of the like mobile style where it's counterweighted and it's hung by a piece of fishing line. I thought I had this like weird, you know, wake up in the morning with an idea kind of moment. And I thought, what if I did a flying crank ghost mechanism for a floating lantern? But the mechanism would be on its side instead of hung from above.
Okay.
It's as I'm explaining it, I'm doing a terrible job. So
yeah, no, I'm trying to wrap my head. My first thought is like, how would you, if it's going to hang from the, you know, if it's above, like, what are you going to disguise? Like, how do you hide that? If you put it on the side, how do you hide the mechanism on the side? What do you use to disguise?
So what I did was I basically made fence posts, like a little, you know, enclosed grave site that has 4 posts, and so all of the wires run through those posts. So
that's the one grave where you have it's fenced in. It has fencing all around it, correct? Okay. Yeah.
So essentially, what I've done is I've like created a frame for all of the fishing line to sort of be woven through to keep it taut, and then that way, as the motors pull, it's just pulling from like left front corner to left back or to right back corner and vice versa. So the two motors are kind of creating a very random floating pattern that's both moving forward and backwards and up and down. Now, just in this terrible explanation, you understand why sometimes it doesn't work.
Now,
I'll have to send you a link to the video so you can see it, because you'll be like, "Oh, okay, I understand what you're saying."
I'll try to post a link in the show notes so people can, if they want to see it, they can click on that link and go check it out.
Yes, the short answer after much back and forth is I have a floating lantern.
Now, that was paying homage to the hallowed haunting grounds?
That's correct. And that tombstone, I think, was one of maybe year 2 of our haunt creations. And it was like one of those projects that kind of started off a little rocky and then had some weird stuff happen, and then I had to fix things, and then it became like my favorite tombstone of our entire haunt. So I don't know that one will ever go away, but the floating lantern is the nod to Gary Korb and the team at Hallowed Haunting Grounds, who kind of, I think everyone credits them as being the first people to do that in a haunt. And theirs was the mobile version, kind of a pendulum effect. I only visited Hallowed Haunting Grounds one time, and I would say that outside of just being like a creative kid with very supportive, creative parents, is probably like the number 2 thing that really got me into Halloween. Was just that one single experience at Hallowed Haunting Grounds where I was like, what in the world is going on here, and how do I do this myself?
I don't know what this is, but I want to be a part of this. Damn it. I got to do this.
Totally.
Oh man, I spent so much time. This is just a little sidetrack. So I had that interview with Gary. It was like a 2-parter. It was like a hour long. And so I did 2 different videos. I went through all the trouble of producing that video. And I contacted you. I'm like, hey, do you guys have any pictures? And nobody could come up with like good pictures, like good resolution. You would hit me to the AI.
No, they're all terrible.
Yeah, so I ran the pictures through the AI, and I got some decent quality pictures. Some of the occasionally the face would look like a complete like Gary's face would look like a cartoon character. But in general, most of the pictures, it cleaned them up so much that they were very usable. So I spent tons of hours going through and producing both of those videos, thinking that those videos were going to just be like huge, and I was going to do like huge view numbers on there. It was like a couple hundred views, just like every other video I had ever put out. I was like, damn it, I spent so much fucking effort trying to make those videos rock, because I thought they were going to do really well, but whatever.
So the data behind video views is that the average content creator gets somewhere between 3 and 7% of their subscriber base to watch every video.
That's insane.
So if you've got like 5,000 subs, and you're getting a couple hundred views per video, you're well within what is like the acceptable reaction and views from your subscribers. Yeah, don't feel bad.
No, I don't. I was just like, man, it's funny when you put a lot of effort into something, you think it's gonna just like be great, and then
every time,
oh, well, okay. And then you put out something. I put out some stupid video like top 10 uses for spray foam, 30,000 views. What?
Totally.
Like I haven't been able to replicate that ever, but that's okay. Whatever. I'm going back to my roots here. I'm a podcaster, man. Right. That's what I am. I'm going to stay in my lane. So for fog and effects, do you do ground fog? Do you just do regular, I don't know, just like a regular, like kind of misty fog, or what do you do?
I wish I could. So where our house is located, we get almost a constant breeze that loves to change directions at random. So I can be pushing fog out into the yard, and 1 minute it'll be heading north, and the next minute it'll be heading south. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is that the entire street gets fogged out, which just makes it unsafe for people. So we sold our fogger. We were like, we can never use this thing. Might as well put it in the hands of someone who can. So we do no fog. But what we do to sort of make up for it is there's a lot of different audio stuff going on. So there's a music bed, which kind of fades in and fades out. There's a lot of environmental sounds. So like crickets and rain and thunder and all that sort of stuff, which apparently we must do a pretty decent job, because at least once every couple of nights, I will get somebody that says, God, you guys have a lot of crickets in this neighborhood, and all of it's manufactured. But the fact that it's, you know, confusing people is working in our favor.
So you have multiple speakers, so you have the crickets playing out of one, the thunder and lightning or whatever.
Yeah,
like
there's
the thunder out of another, and
multiple speakers running multiple audio programs, and they all run on like a 4-hour loop. That way they all stay in sync, because some of the audio cues I didn't want to overlap. So like one of the other like sort of main pieces in our display is a haunted radio, which was an idea that I had back in the Halloween forum days, but I could never figure out if it would make sense to people. And it's essentially it's an old tombstone radio that randomly starts playing music, and it plays a handful of different songs, and they all last for 10 or 15 seconds each. And as the song plays, they kind of start to take a turn. Like the audio starts getting weird, or whatever the phrase in the song lyric is might be taken in the wrong context, and things like that. So it's kind of this creepy radio, and you can see that the extension cord is sort of sitting there in front of it. So it's not plugged into anything. It just kind of starts playing at random. But so I didn't want that to conflict with the music that plays throughout the haunt or anything else. So it's all just one long program to sort of keep that from happening accidentally.
Yeah. How does that get triggered, or how does that, is it just
It's
running on a loop?
School.
Is it just running on a loop?
Yeah, it is. So it's a 4-hour loop, and I was able to basically pull all of my audio tracks together in Pro Tools back in the day. And I was able to basically look at everything in time. So I could say, okay, well, here's where the music is playing, so I don't want to have the radio here. And here's a dead spot, so I can put the radio audio playing in this place, and then kind of look throughout the landscape of the audio tracks to figure out where the places are where those little events can happen. And then I just exported each individually, and then I have multiple small audio amplifiers with SD card readers in it that all power up and start playing automatically. So the loops all start at the same place at the same time, and everything is run off of a smart plug. So once they get power, all of them boot in the same amount of time, and then the SD cards start playing the audio, and that lasts the entire night of the haunt. And then when the lights go off, the audio cuts off, and that's it for the night. So it's pretty old school in its application, but it just means that I don't have to worry about whether or not something's triggering correctly, or if something had like a PIR or a mat or something, I have to worry about, is that thing working right? I try to make it as hands-off as I possibly can.
Now,
because I just want it to come on and do what it's supposed to do, and then turn off at the end of the night.
So outside of the sound effects, the crickets, the thunder, etc., and the radio kind of coming on and going off, you don't have any other type of soundtrack with any type of drone or music or anything else running throughout the night?
There's a music score. It was a piece of music from the Eddie Murphy Haunted Mansion movie, and it's only like 30 or 40 seconds of it, and it just kind of comes on. It's usually pretty low, but it sort of sets a vibe for the haunt without it like being in your face and being super repetitious.
Oh, that's it. For like
that's it. Yeah,
like,
it's really straightforward and quite simple. And I think a lot of that too has to do with, you know, we live in a sleepy neighborhood. We had elderly people living next to us and across the street and stuff. And so I never wanted to do anything that I was going to have those difficult conversations with them about, oh, it's too loud, or oh, there's too many cars or too many people or whatever. And so I wanted to do something that was just like really mellow, that wouldn't bother anybody, but was just creepy and eerie and was just sort of like a nod to all of the different Halloween experiences that I'd been to, like Hallowed Haunting Grounds, like Haunted Mansion, stuff like that. It's all, you know, very much in that vein.
I watched a whole slew of your videos over the last couple of days, so you probably made an extra $1.57 from Google.
You mean 15.7 cents.
Anyway, so I like, oh, let me go back to it. Let me see. Like, I always like to see what people's first videos are. And I went back to your first video, and it was that RCA. Now, I remember you posting this RCA setup on one of the forums, and I remember seeing it. I'm like, oh, that's a really cool idea. One of these days I'll have to do it. 15 years later, I still haven't done it. I'm still using the Wago nuts, but it works for me. But it, you know, sometimes through the years it can be kind of a pain in the ass. I really need to take a year to really rewire that entire cemetery scene of mine. But so I was looking.
I mean, honestly, your approach isn't all that different from mine. In fact, if I were to do it again, I wouldn't use the RCA connectors because, I mean, granted, it's been, at least 10 years since I did it. I have to go out there every October with some steel wool and polish all of those RCA jacks.
Really?
Because they get corroded over there. I mean, you know, we don't get weather here in LA, so I just have all that dew and mist and stuff from the night sky to deal with. But every single one of those connectors is rusted out. Oh. So they all kind of have to be tended to year after year. So it's, you know,
okay,
it sort of saved me time, but also didn't save me time.
So I won't bother then.
Well, so the upside is that you can use that same approach, but you can use waterproof connectors. Oh. And they're just as cheap as the RCA jacks, which I think, and it's probably been 5 or 6 years since I looked, you can't find them anywhere. Like Radio Shack was the place to go to get all of that stuff. Yeah. They're gone. Yeah. Fry's is gone. Like, good luck finding them on Amazon, where, you know, you actually can find all black male and female RCA connectors. Like, inevitably, they're like, nope, we want to sell you them in 2 colors, or we want to sell them in 4 colors. Yeah. So, yeah, if I were to do it again, it would be a nice little trip over to, like, Alibaba or AliExpress or one of those websites and buy the outdoor rated waterproof connectors because they literally could be wired up the same way. Yeah.
Well, like I said, I one thing I learned, and I posted a video about it that nobody watched. But anyway, it was I talked about the fact that you do not use stranded wire for outdoor use. Make sure you use solid core wire, because the stranded wire, it gets corroded and it just breaks after a number of years of usage. Actually, not even that long, just from being outside, it just gets all shitty corroded, that white corrosion shit, and then it just breaks, and you constantly have to replace them. I did all of my original candles and my little cheap spotlights that the plug, you know, the little ones in the PVC that you plug into the ground to hit the tombstones. Yeah. I did them all that way, and over the years, I think I've finally last year got rid of all of the stranded wire. I took some time and just like anything I could find that had stranded wire, and I pulled it out and redid it. I had a spool of like 1,000 feet of solid core wire, and I was just been going through like a maniac. So over the last couple of years, I got rid of all that shit, and I've had a lot less. I've had almost no problems with them, even with the water. Like, and I get a lot of rain. I get a lot of rain in October usually. It'd be a shocker if I don't get a lot of rain. So I usually will have a night or two during October where it just blows a fuse, and I'm like, I don't even know what blew the fuse, and I'm not going to run around in the rain to get the lights back on, because I have everything set up. Usually, one of the last weeks of September, and I have the haunt up for like 6 weeks or something like that. So I have no problem. I'm one of the lucky people. I've had no problems. No kids mess with me. Nobody messes with me. I have a kind of sleepy neighborhood too, but it's just, nobody messes with it. So I get my stuff out early, and I could tweak it and screw around with it for the month. But anyway, so now that video was posted like 11 years ago, and I was going through the videos, and I'm like, okay, so we got a video this year, a couple of videos this year, a couple of videos that year. And it wasn't until like 3 years ago that you kind of went all in on the Van Oaks props. Is that about right? Like,
I kind of found myself at a crossroads career-wise. And so between having just been let go from a company that I had worked for because they filed for bankruptcy, and a global pandemic, and living in a state with, more people in a 6-mile radius than probably the entire state of Massachusetts. It left me with a lot of time at home. And the other thing that it kind of took away from me was monthly haunter meetings. So I just figured, well, if I would normally be teaching people about how to make stuff, maybe I just make some videos about it and whatever. YouTube is a thing now, right? And because I'm way older than the average YouTuber. My background is in graphic design, and prior to that was in music production. And I was just kind of like, well, screw it. I got nothing better to do with my time, and we'll just see what happens. Mm-hmm. And I just kept doing it, and the reception was good. I think a lot of people were at home, so they were, glued to their YouTube channels, watching these videos that I was putting out. And at some point, I just kind of reached a tipping point where I felt like maybe this is something that I could do as an actual job. And then I really went like whole hog at it.
How many videos, like how long did it take before you had that video that like really caught some traction and really like took your channel, like kind of shot your channel up, got the views
Weirdly,
up?
I haven't had one of those videos yet. I've had videos that have performed well for me over time, but I've never had a video that was a viral success that just like created all this massive growth for me all at once. I think I found a niche that is underserved, because there's like me, there's Hollywood Haunter, there's Stilt Beast, Alan Hops,
Wicked Makers.
There's Wicked Makers. There's not a lot of us. So we kind of have a corner on the market, and I think it was just sort of like a right place, right time, and people have just, I don't know, slowly caught on or what. Yeah. But it's, gone from a couple hundred subscribers to 70-something thousand subscribers. Now, granted, that was over the course of like 4 years. So it hasn't been an overnight success. And truth be told, I still wouldn't say that it is a success. Yeah. I think, not how like people who look at YouTube channels success would call it. I think for me, it's been a huge success. I get to make a living doing things that I enjoy for a community that I've always felt an extreme admiration and appreciation for all of the things that they've given to me. So this is like kind of my love letter to all of the haunters who've come before me, that were open with all of the methods that they use to like get these crazy effects and stuff like that. So, this is just kind of like me picking up the torch and running with it.
Yeah. The one thing about how-to videos, I mean, the good thing about it is that they don't really they don't go out of style. Like the
Right.
people there's always somebody who's going to say, I want to find how to make something, and they'll type it in and boom, your video comes up, and they'll want to watch it to learn something. I mean, I did that I got into woodworking a couple of years ago because I was looking to build some stuff. And I'm watching YouTube videos from like 10 years ago or something like that. So, I mean, or, 5, 6, whatever. But it's like the information is still valid. It's still great information, and it still can really help people. So, it doesn't kind of go out of style or out of fashion. It's not like clickbaity, newsy bullshit or whatever, or pop nonsense,
right.
And one of the good things about your videos too, which I really appreciate, is that you'll speed up, when you're working on something that you don't need to see you working on. Like, that's what I love Alan,
right.
But sometimes you're just watching Alan for like 15 minutes working on stuff. And some people, I guess, could be entertained by that, but I give me the information and kind of speed through a lot. I don't need to see you do every little thing, in real time.
Sure.
You can speed through it. You kind of keep your videos tight. You move through it. Great. You get what you need out of it, and you can get in and out in like 10 or 15 minutes. You don't have to spend all that extra time.
I basically made the videos that I would be looking for.
Yeah, I wouldn't sit through like an hour. If I watch Alan's videos, I'm constantly scrolling through the video, getting like, all right, let's get to that next part that I need to find out. Like, what is he doing? What's the next step of this process? You must have a massive amount of materials, because you constantly have to look for the next project to put out. You've got to constantly, so you must have like a ridiculous shop now. Do you have like just a massive amount of materials to pull from?
No, and
No.
my shop is literally half of a 2-car garage, and most of it is taken up with our larger Halloween props. So like the 2 big brick columns that go out in front of our haunt, I'm standing 2 feet from them right now. Like, our haunt is everywhere I look in this space, and the rest of it is like flat surfaces with all sorts of junk on top of it. Like, it's a nightmare shop for sure, which I guess, is sort of on theme, but it's, I've really been trying to make an effort the last couple of years to use up as much of the materials and things that I've held on to for a rainy day. And so a lot of the projects that I've been tackling have been sort of, what can I make with this, these 2 chunks of foam that have been sitting here for 6 months or 6 years. Or, like, what are things that other people might have laying around that I could turn into a project for them to make something? So it's surprisingly not as much material storage as you would think. The only thing that I do tend to hoard when I can find it is the 2-inch XPS foam, because California, houses aren't built here with that level of insulation, so we don't have a use for it.
Where do you get it?
So weirdly enough, you can get it at Home Depot or Lowe's, but sometimes they'll have it and they'll have a ton. It's almost as if like a shipment that was headed for somewhere else ended up in Los Angeles. And so I'll go and buy a handful of sheets and just stow it away, because I know at some point I will need foam to make something.
Yeah.
And there were quite a few years in there where you just couldn't find it at all. You'd have to go to like specialty dealers and pay like a 3-time markup on the stuff that was just painful. But yeah, not a ton of materials.
I picked up a couple of things from watching your videos that I thought were pretty cool, like that shore bonder. It's like a hot glue, almost like a hot glue, but it's shore bonder. I was looking at that and I'm like, oh, that's great. Not having to use like barge contact cement or something like that, and being able to use just like a pull the trigger and like a hot glue. That's great. I was like, oh man, I bought a package of all the different, different thickness like EVA foams. Like I just went on Blick and I bought a package. I don't know what I had in mind when I bought that. I think it was just one of those, like I saw it and I'm like, oh, I should buy this. And I didn't really have a project lined up for it. I don't know why I bought it, but I still have it in my shop from 2 years ago. And I'm like, man, I gotta really do something with this. One thing I'm really lacking is I need to do some more work with that foam, because I was watching the torch prop that you made, and I was like, wow, that's I could bang that out in no time. I just have to start working with it. And I saw you using the Shore Bonder, and I'm like, oh man, that's a game changer. That would get me to start really getting into it, where I don't have to wait for contact, deal with contact cement and the fumes of that stuff.
For sure.
I mean, it has its place, but I'd prefer not to have to breathe that, wear a mask and have to breathe that shit.
Yeah, well, like we were talking about earlier, as a haunter, you're often just trying to squeeze in working on a prop between work and family time, or the commute, or whatever real life responsibilities you have. So to have to wait around for things to set up before you can use it, any sort of economy that can be found in assembling a prop is always seems to be worth the expense to me. And something as simple as hot glue sticks that just have a crazy high melting point. That when I saw that, I was just like, yep, send me as much of it as you guys can. I don't know what I'll use it for yet, but I will figure it out.
I'm ordering up some tomorrow, as a matter of fact.
There you go.
Now you had a great technique too. I saw that I've always, for doing stones, I mean, on most of my tombstones, I've just used dry lock. That's been my staple. I've used dry lock for a long time. You had a different take on it. What did you use for your foam coat?
There's been a couple different versions that I've tried over the years. Most recently, I kind of took a method that Chris and Gina from Hollywood Haunter had used, which was just using a Flex Bond tile grout. And it works really well, but it can be a little fragile. It's not as good as dry lock, because I feel like dry lock is making more of a chemical bond. But then there's other stuff like
wasn't there thin set or something that you used?
There's another tile thin set kind of thing you mix it with a polymer additive instead of water, and that does a pretty good job at bonding to stuff. And that was something that I had seen a million years ago from K Studios. He had posted some videos of some mausoleum facades that he had built that were just fantastic. And that was his method of hard coating. And I used that for a couple of years, and it works well, but it has a very short lifespan. So you got to know what you're doing with it right away. In difference to the dry lock, which is, I sort of just keep going back to it because it's convenient.
Yeah.
If you're not using it, you just throw the lid back on the can and set it aside. It's not a ticking time bomb at the bottom of your mix bucket, which is kind of the problem with any of those other methods, although they all have their place. But the dry lock really is kind of the bread and butter for me. It's just super predictable. And because I've worked with it for so long, I kind of know what I can get away with. It's all right, well, maybe the seams on this monument that I'm doing aren't super tight, but I bet you I could fill that in with some dry lock and make those seams disappear, kind of thing. Whereas with other products, you don't necessarily know what you're going to get yourself into. So,
well, I was watching a video where you were talking about routering out, using a router to carve out raised letters and all that kind of stuff. Now, I'm sure that was something you did then. What kind of new tech do you have now? Are you down with 3D printers and CNC machines and what all the kids are into nowadays? Or do you have any fun tools? What do you have?
I have a couple 3D printers that I use all the time. And I know I kind of catch a little flack for it because I use them kind of frequently in videos because they're just huge time savers. And I had a CNC for a while, which I thought would be awesome for making tombstones. And while that statement is true, it wasn't any faster than if I were to do it by hand. And again, you know, when you're talking about you've got X amount of time that you could dedicate to working on your hobbies, I can't be stuck kind of like babysitting a machine. And that is sort of the deal with CNC machines. You can set them off to do a job, but you do kind of have to keep an eye on them because it's a, you know, spinning drill bit that's going many thousands of RPMs. So, you know, between that and just constantly having to vacuum up foam, that was the other problem too.
I acquired a like a big Delta, like dust collector, and I set up, I created a whole PVC, you know, so I did kind of collect a dust collecting system, and I have a hose that runs down and attaches to the CNC front. That really, that is like absolutely necessary unless you're going to stand there with the shop vac and follow the router as it cars around, or your shop is going to be a fucking mess. Like you cut up MDF and oh my god, the shit dust would be everywhere, you know. It'd be insane.
You know, unfortunately, because of, like I was saying, you know, I'm in a half 2-car garage for my shop, and my CNC machine was 4 foot square. And so I built a platform for it where I could roll it out onto my driveway and then kick it up into a table formation and then run the machine. But I also have neighbors, and I didn't want to just have my shop vac running for 3 hours straight.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, for them, but also for me, like, I don't want to listen to my shop vac for 3 hours.
Yeah.
And so in the end, it's a great technology, and I really enjoyed working with it, but it just did not fit the pace that I like to work at. And truth be told, oftentimes when doing any type of tombstone lettering by hand, when there's a mess up, it usually kind of leads to a good like detail. I try to like turn all my screw ups into details. So it sort of like forces my hand to do something that I hadn't intended to, and more often than not, that ends up working to my advantage. So I got rid of the CNC machine, but the 3D printers they're clutch. I really like them.
What CAD software do you use?
I'm a Autodesk Fusion 360 guy.
Okay.
And for no particular reason other than it was just, it was the one that clicked for me. I tried using a handful of others and it just wouldn't make sense to me. And for some reason, Fusion did. I think the other thing to remember too about doing any kind of 3D modeling is that it requires a bit of abstract thinking. You know, more often than not, I'm not doing additive design, I'm doing subtractive design. So if I'm trying to create the shape of a building, I might make a box and then I'll remove chunks out of that box to create the look of windows or, you know, things like that. Instead of trying to like build a window and then build the actual building and then merge those things together. It's kind of, at least for me, worked to think about things sort of in reverse as like, what is the general shape I'm after and where would I start and what would I kind of chisel away essentially.
To start to wrap things up, what about any tips or tricks that you would give to newer prop makers, people getting into the hobby, that type of thing?
It's interesting. There's so many different places that you can go to learn different things. I think probably the greatest tip of advice that I could give would be to do very little talking and a lot of listening. People are willing to share their knowledge with you if you let them. And going into spaces trying to prove yourself may not work to your advantage. Outside of that, I would say, you know, learn about all of the tools at your disposal and kind of keep like a mental catalog of all of those things and how they may work to your benefit for any given project. You know, they always say there's, a dozen different ways to do anything. And that is true. Just like talking about, do you use dry lock, or do you use Plex Bond, or do you use thin set, or do you, come up with something completely different? It all comes down to application. And I think just kind of like knowing what is available to you and how those things interact with each other is probably going to be the best bit of education that you can have as a prop maker.
Are you also involved in a podcast? Are you doing a podcast with a couple of guys?
Very infrequently.
Oh, okay.
There is one. We sort of started off with a bang and had recorded a ton of episodes in advance of our first release, and then just couldn't keep up the pace. So now we kind of do one episode a quarter.
Yeah.
But for anybody that wants to listen, it's called Maker's Method.
Come on, man. Podcasting, you're really slumming it up. Dude, you're a YouTube talent. You don't waste your time with podcasting. That's the lowest denominator, man.
Anyway. You got to get them everywhere.
Obviously, you're everywhere. So why don't you plug all the stuff where people can find you?
You can find me on damn near every platform at Van Oaks Props. But most often you can find me every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific over on YouTube with a new project video. And they're mainly Halloween focused come June, July, all the way through till November. And the rest of the time, if you need a little palate cleanser, I do all sorts of fun Star Wars and pop culture related builds. So be sure to go over there and check that out and give me a subscribe and watch a few videos. You might learn a thing or two.
And watch through the whole video. Don't watch 2 minutes of his video. watch through the whole thing. Even if you're not really watching it, just let the video run, man.
Please, my livelihood depends on it.
Come on, we got to keep him. We got to keep building shit, right? You got to keep you busy. All right, that's man. Right. Derek, it's been too long.
Indeed.
And it has been a pleasure.
Pleasure was all mine, Chris.
And we will catch you around the net.
I'm going now. Heaven help you.
Please like and follow the podcast. Stalk us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Links in the description. And help us by sharing Hauntcast with all your haunted Halloween brethren. Until next time, stay scary.